great guideline. Trust but verify. That information that you receive, you can take it at face value, but it's always worth verifying. You don't have to ask for a copy of the seller's Schedule E tax returns. As a broker, that's something that actually frustrates me immensely, because I know that the second a seller produces their Schedule E tax return and provides it to you as the buyer, you're going to ask all of the questions. Why did they write this off? What's this maintenance charge? Why did they only make X, Y, Z? What's this depreciation thing that means that they lost way more money last year? You said this was a profitable building. Well, it opens up so many questions that really you can just verify this with a couple things. Looking at copies of utility bills. That's a great opportunity to verify data. Reviewing copies of lease agreements. All of these things give you a chance to analyze these numbers and make sure that they are accurate. So, moving on onto the, apparently I have a fancy setup here. My bad. All right, next stage. I didn't want to spend too much time on analysis. Negotiation. Has anybody ever read this book before? Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss? Good book?
I bought it. I need to read it.
I like it. Hey, appreciate the honesty on that too. So, negotiation. This is an interesting part of the real estate deal that's not just specific to this deal. And I want to touch upon that first, because while you might be concerned about negotiating the best possible deal that you can for a property, this owner that you might be negotiating with could have another 20 buildings that you want to buy over the next 5 years. And sometimes it's important that you set the expectations up front, that you're negotiating fairly, you're negotiating honestly, you're not trying to pull a fast one on the seller there, and you're really trying to get to the finish line rather than trying to beat the other person at that negotiation. Because they will remember that, and if they have any other buildings out there, or they have a mouth, and they have and they talk about your reputation, it will get around. So make sure that when you're negotiating, you're doing so in good faith, you're trying to do so openly and honestly, as it does make things go a lot smoother down the road. So, like I said here, the goal of the negotiation is not always to win, it is just to get to the finish line. If the deal gets done, that means that the deal is done and you've accomplished your goal. That's why you submitted the offer in the first place. You don't need to get caught up about what that thing the seller did that pissed you off 2 weeks ago that you're still holding on to. Sometimes it's easier to let it go and just let the deal progress forward. Keep it high level. Focus on a few key deal points. As soon as you get to the weeds of negotiating every single line in the contract, this is where the deals die. Which brings me to my next 2 points. Deal fatigue sets in fast, and time and attorneys, sorry for anybody in the room that's an attorney, kills all deals. The more time that you let things languish, the more time that it takes for you to get back to a seller, the more time that you have to think things over or rerun your numbers or crunch things over, that's more time for them to be doubting you and your ability to close. That's more time for somebody else who's been banging on their door for the last 3 months trying to buy that property to come in and say, hey, when that guy backs out, I'm here to buy it. It's important that you don't let time kill deals. And while I'm picking on attorneys in this last line here, I mean this with any degree of separation between you and the party that you're negotiating with. I'm a real estate broker. I get paid to negotiate for other people. I get paid to insert myself into the middle of a deal and make sure that the other parties don't talk to each other because they want me to negotiate on their behalf. However, more often than not, introducing more people into these negotiations only makes them more complicated. It's more personalities, it's more egos, it's more delay, it's more opportunities for missed communications. So if there's 2 brokers on a deal, and 2 attorneys on a deal, and there's a closing attorney, of course, because the bank has to have their own attorney, so why wouldn't there be 3 attorneys on this deal? And there's a buyer, and there's a seller. Well, now we're up to 7 people for one transaction, and that process of the buyer talking to their attorney and getting advice from them, and then passing that along to the broker, and they pass it along to the other broker, and the other broker passes it along to the seller, and the seller has to get their attorney's advice on it. Tell me that's not exhausting. I'm exhausted right now. That is a lot to do, and that can kill deals. So don't let them take too long, or you risk them not moving forward at all. So now, I don't know what I did with this slide here. Sorry, guys. Apparently, we're going to have to click through all of these every time. Due diligence. That's the next stage that I wanted to get into here. So due diligence. This is a nice electric panel I found at one of my properties. I don't know how many guys see these nice handwritten signs, or this one I think was just on a bunch of electrical tape if I remember right. But I've seen the notepad ones, the ones where they just Sharpie them straight onto the metal. And there's a concerning number of breakers that do not line up there. I just want to point that out real quick. But due diligence, there are 4 key areas for due diligence that we're going to be covering. There's the physical inspections, there are the environmental assessments, there is the financial analysis or financial verification, and legal review. All 4 of these pieces of due diligence play a part in the process. The physical inspections are your building inspections. That's when you're either walking the property yourself and just looking around visually and inspecting it. You might be hiring a home inspector to do something. You might be hiring a HVAC technician to check out the mechanical systems of the building. This is anything that's a physical inspection that you might be considering. The environmental kind of touches into that, but I figured it gets its own separate category. This is the lead paint, the asbestos, has a methamphetamine lab ever been on the premises? Has there been any history of an auto repair shop been on the premises before? All of the environmental assessments, the things that you might not be able to see, those are the things that really keep me up at night. That's the thing that makes me nervous. You can see a lot when you're walking through a building. You can have it, once you get more comfortable with these properties and once you get more comfortable with what things cost, you can visualize and understand how expensive it is to fix things. But if there was a dry cleaner at a piece of property that you're considering buying, and at some point in the last 100 years a dry cleaner existed on that piece of land, you're screwed. That stuff is nasty. It lives forever and seeps into the groundwater and goes down and down and down and spreads and spreads and spreads, and it can cost millions of dollars to excavate and clean up sites like that. They can be endless problems. So environmental is something that you don't want to skimp on if you have, if you're looking at a property that might have some suspect history. In particular, with commercial real estate, it's mandatory that you have an environmental